The text arrived at 9:47 p.m., just as the rain began tapping against the kitchen window of Caleb Morrison's small blue house in Cedar Grove, Ohio. His 5-year-old daughter Ava was asleep on the couch, her tiny hand still curled around a crayon, her unfinished drawing of a wedding dress spread across the coffee table. Caleb almost ignored the buzz of his phone. It had been a long shift at the auto shop, and most nights ended with him reheating leftovers and pretending he wasn't lonely. But when he looked at the screen and saw the message, his chest tightened so suddenly he had to sit down. "Pick me up. I'm in the dress." If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of words to change lives, take a moment right now to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to this channel. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the smallest joke can become the biggest turning point. Caleb had typed those 3 reckless words, "I'll marry you," only that afternoon, half laughing in the break room at Patterson's Auto Repair. Rachel Turner had been sitting across from him, nervously twisting the straw in her soda cup. She had come in for a simple brake check, but stayed longer than necessary. Over the past few months, she had started bringing cookies for the mechanics, always claiming she baked too much. Caleb knew better. He had seen the way her eyes softened when Ava ran into the shop after school, waving her spelling tests like trophies. Rachel adored Ava. She always knelt down to the little girl's level, asking about her drawings and listening like it was the most important conversation in the world. That afternoon, Rachel had confessed, with a trembling voice and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, that her ex-fiancé was getting married that weekend in Columbus. She had been invited out of obligation. She joked that maybe she should just show up in a wedding dress herself and shock everyone. Caleb, exhausted and trying to lighten the mood, had laughed and said that if she ever did that, he would marry her just to save her from the embarrassment. The words had slipped out easily, harmlessly, like a bandage over a wound he didn't fully understand. He hadn't realized how deep her hurt ran. Now, staring at the glowing screen, Caleb felt something shift inside him. He called her immediately. No answer. He tried again, straight to voicemail. A second text arrived, this one with a photo. Rachel stood under a flickering street lamp in what looked like the parking lot of a small chapel outside town. She was wearing a simple white dress, nothing extravagant, but unmistakably bridal. Her blonde hair fell loosely over her shoulders, and her mascara had smudged slightly, as if she had been crying. Behind her, a hand-painted sign read, "Grace Community Chapel." Caleb's heart pounded. He looked at Ava, asleep and unaware, then back at the message. He thought about the years since his wife, Lauren, had died in a car accident on a rainy highway just like this one. He remembered standing in a hospital corridor, holding a doctor's clipboard and trying to understand how a life could end in a sentence. Since then, he had buried himself in work and fatherhood. He had convinced himself that love was something you survived once, not something you risked again. But Rachel had slowly changed that. She never pushed. She never tried to replace anyone. She just showed up. At school plays, at birthday parties, at the grocery store when Caleb struggled to manage a cart and a child at the same time. She had once fixed Ava's broken doll with a needle and thread while Caleb watched, realizing he hadn't seen someone care that gently in years. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof. Caleb scooped Ava into his arms, wrapped her in a blanket, and carried her to the truck. He buckled her in carefully, his mind racing. He wasn't sure what he was driving toward. A proposal? A breakdown? A mistake he couldn't undo? The roads were slick and mostly empty. Streetlights reflected off the pavement in long, wavering streaks. As he drove toward the chapel on the edge of town, memories crowded his thoughts. The first time Rachel had laughed at one of his terrible jokes. The way she had cried quietly at Lauren's grave on the anniversary of her death, thinking no one saw her. The afternoon she had told him she wasn't afraid of loving a man with a past, but she was terrified of never being chosen. That was it, he realized. She didn't need a wedding. She needed to know she was worth staying for. When he pulled into the chapel parking lot, he saw her immediately. Rachel was sitting on the front steps now, the white dress glowing under the yellow light. Her shoulders were hunched, and her hands clutched her phone like a lifeline. For a moment, Caleb just sat there, Engine idling, fear creeping up his spine. What if this was too much? What if he couldn't give her what she wanted? Ava stirred in the back seat and mumbled softly. Caleb looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror. She had grown up watching him grieve in silence. She deserved to see him brave, too. He stepped out into the rain. Rachel looked up as he approached, her expression a fragile mix of hope and humiliation. She tried to smile, but her lip trembled. Caleb could see now that the dress was simple, likely ordered online in a moment of impulse. It wasn't about spectacle, it was about courage. He sat beside her on the wet steps, not caring about the rain soaking through his jacket. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The world felt suspended, as if waiting for a decision. Caleb told her that he hadn't meant to joke about something so serious. He admitted that he was scared of losing someone again, scared of loving and failing. He confessed that every time she walked into the shop, his day got lighter, that when Ava asked why Miss Rachel didn't live with them, he didn't have a good answer. Rachel listened, tears slipping down her cheeks. She explained that when she saw her ex moving on, she realized she had been waiting for someone who had already left her behind. She didn't want to spend her life being almost chosen. Caleb's careless promise had felt, for one reckless moment, like certainty. The rain softened to a drizzle. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled away. Caleb took her hand, noticing how cold it was. He told her that marriage wasn't a punchline, and it wasn't a rescue mission. It was a promise to wake up every day and choose each other, even when fear whispered otherwise. He couldn't erase his past, and he wouldn't pretend to be fearless. But he could choose. He stood up and helped her to her feet. Ava, now awake and peeking through the truck window, pressed her tiny hands against the glass. Rachel noticed her and gave a small, shy wave. In that quiet parking lot, without an audience or music or flowers, Caleb asked Rachel if she would marry him, not because he had joked about it, not because she was in a dress, but because he was tired of living half a life. He wanted laughter in the kitchen again. He wanted someone to sit beside him at school recitals. He wanted Ava to grow up seeing love that wasn't afraid. Rachel didn't scream or collapse dramatically. She simply nodded, tears blending with rain, and stepped into his arms. They didn't get married that night. There was no minister waiting inside, no rings ready. Instead, Caleb drove her home first, where she changed into jeans and a sweater, and they laughed at the absurdity of it all. Ava insisted on wearing the white dress around the living room, twirling until she fell over giggling. The tension of the evening melted into something warmer, steadier. Over the next few months, they planned a small ceremony in the same chapel. Friends from the auto shop showed up in pressed shirts. Neighbors brought casseroles. Ava walked down the aisle, scattering slightly crooked flower petals with fierce concentration. It wasn't grand, but it was honest. Caleb learned that love after loss isn't about replacing what was gone. It's about building something new with the pieces that remain. Rachel learned that being chosen doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with rain and hesitation and a man brave enough to admit he's afraid. And if this story has touched your heart, if you've ever felt unchosen or afraid to love again, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video so more people can find hope in it. Your engagement truly helps these stories reach those who need them most. Before we end, tell us in the comments, have you ever taken a risk on love when it scared you the most? That rainy night in Cedar Grove didn't just begin a marriage, it began a new chapter for a widowed father, a woman who refused to settle for almost, and a little girl who finally got to finish her drawing of a wedding dress. This time with 3 smiling stick figures standing beneath a crooked church steeple. And sometimes, that's all a second chance really is. 3 words spoken carelessly, then chosen carefully, until they become forever.